What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Filip Latocha, and today we are talking about 5 things I've written down as taper tricks leading up into the Chicago Marathon, as I'll be the first person to say it. I'm not good at tapering whatsoever. I get like marathon jitters about a week before the race, and all I want to do is kind of run at like marathon pace or a little bit faster, playing around with it at that pace, but realistically, you're supposed to tone it back a lot, if not just cut running almost completely until race days. So again, I've comprised a list of 5 tactics that I'm going to try to use and like get better at during the taper to avoid essentially going too fast during the marathon. So before we get into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're already subscribed and watching the content. Thanks so much, love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Strava and Instagram for all sorts of updates according to the Chicago Marathon, Tokyo Marathon, you know it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 1 on my list, this one should be all a priority on your taper list well before the tapering even begins, and that's to fix your sleep schedule. So this is one of my objectives leading up to the race, is to be a little bit more conscious of waking up around 7 to 7:30 just about every single day, and kind of tapering that back as well to like 6:30, 6 o'clock, 5:30, just leading up to the race, and essentially improving that rather than waking up a little bit later during a weekend, or wake up during the, I guess, like the work day at, a reasonable time, like 8 o'clock, and then just completely bombing the rest of the day because you only slept like 4 or 5 hours. So in a way, improving the sleep schedule is going to improve your recovery overall, and adjusting to get into that AM circadian rhythm rather than like, waking up at noon or something like that is probably the right move leading into the marathon. And I know it takes about 30 to 60 days to like fully adapt to becoming a morning person and whatnot, but there's tricks like taking melatonin and other things that can help you expedite that process, even though it might not be the most natural thing to really consider. So my game plan, however, is to try to take some melatonin early in the night. Try not to work out too late at night, because I also have a tendency of staying at the gym until like 11, 12 p.m. sometimes, so fixing that is going to be pretty important. So that's point number 1. Fix the sleeping schedule, and the recovery will also follow there. Now, point number 2 on my taper tricks. This one almost contradicts point 1, but it's more of going to be a mental reprieve to your taper and to your marathon overall, and that is to party and go out a little bit more. So I use the words party loosely. I don't mean like, getting blackout wasted or something like that. I just mean, go out, have a good time, just live in the present. Don't think too much about the marathon. Just kind of zone that out completely. So the perfect example here from, just personal experience was just this past weekend. I hung out with my friends, and, we just basically spent the entire weekend, almost the entire weekend together, just doing tons of things. So like, we went to the city to pick up my one friend. My other buddy lives in Carroll Stream, so he came up to me. We, drove into the city, hung out in the city for a little bit over the weekend. Then real late at night, I see where it kind of contradicts point 1. We came back to like my brother's houses, which is also kind of close by over here. We hung out there until 3 o'clock, and then we slept for about 4 or 5 hours. And then the next day, for my company, we ended up doing a plane pull. So it was a charity event, and it was just something we were able to do as a group of friends, in addition to me allowing my friends to network with my, professional cyber defense team, to be able to just have that experience and just, have one of those moments where it's a fear of missing out of like, hey, I might not have the average day of just pulling an airplane as part of a charity event. So made that a thing of just, kind of touching on the FOMO moments. So for those who don't know what FOMO means, that means fear of missing out. So we all just said yes to all sorts of plans. So we pulled the plane. Then we ended up, getting food afterwards. We all ended up working out at the gym together, and we just kind of hung out, had a bonfire, talked about life, and realistically just kind of talked about goals, aspirations, and things like that. And we just made the most of, going crazy for 24 hours. And yeah, I didn't sleep all too well, but like, I didn't think about the marathon at all. I wasn't stressing about it. I wasn't stressed about the taper. It just felt normal. So point number 3 on my taper list is going to be to cross train. So this one, you kind of have to be a little bit careful with, because you don't want to overdo this one as well, right? You don't want to go too hard on the bike or a swim if you're like a triathlete who's also tapering for the marathon. You just want to take that a little bit easier as well. So my game plan here is just to do some really easy 10 to 20 minute swims If I do have some room on the bike, I will bike for about 20 to 30 minutes if it's possible, whether it's on Zwift or outside if the weather, permits. But I won't stop weightlifting necessarily because that doesn't do too much of an impact on the slow twitch muscle group that I'm going to need for the marathon. It will impact the quicker twitch muscles in, at the end game of my race when I'm going to be relying on those bigger muscle groups to kind of help me power through some certain miles. So again, cross training is just the idea. Well, the idea with the cross training in this particular instance is to avoid having as much impact on your legs during a run training session and kind of minimizing that impact for a swim and for a bike workout. Just to protect the knees, protect the hips, quads, your back, just alleviate that sort of stress on the body, but keep the cardiovascular system moving. So that's point number 3. Point number 4 is to excel at work tasks. So this one, in more of a work example, and again in a personal sense, is more of the 2-week taper window between now and like the Chicago Marathon. You don't have to put in as many hours of running per week as you did previously while training. So what you can do now is focus on other things. And of course, like I mentioned, you can party, you can sleep a little bit more. For me, catching up with some work items or excelling at certain work tasks in the middle of the taper where you save 5 to 6 hours a week because you're not running or training nearly as intensely during that time makes for, in my case, like training for certifications for work or focusing more on different projects or presentations, things like that. That's kind of like a no-brainer, of course, but it's gotten to the point where at least in my case, I've got it to where I've been studying so much more that I don't even think about the marathon right now. Like, I almost would be okay skipping the marathon just to keep focusing on my study for the cert, because A, the cert is like part of my end of the year work goals, and 2, getting the cert would make me much more money with my company. So that's kind of like where training for work has excelled as a taper trick, because I'm spending time there and not spending my mental energy on trying to run fast or overcomplicate or overthink the marathon. So the last point on my taper list here is going to be number 5, which is to build the race suspense. And this was very particular at one point in time during your race day, and that's approximately 24 hours before the marathon. So in this particular instance, the idea would be that after you go through the expo and you've put in your shakeout run, you're now going to kind of get the race jitters started beforehand, maybe like, 24 hours before, 12 hours, even like 3 hours before the race is pretty good, just to finally get into the zone and start building that suspense for when you're going to hit the ground running and essentially just have a controlled marathon race. But the point is, you don't want the jitters to be so hard that you basically sprint the first mile of the marathon. That's going to basically bust it. So don't do that, but keep it in a place where you get to the marathon race day start line and you're not sitting in this like mental state of, I don't know, I guess like, why am I here? Or like, I don't want to do this. Like, you don't want to be too low in your taper suspense, but you also don't want to be so high that you blow up the race in the first 5K. You know what I mean? So you got to find that balance. And for me, the idea is to cut all of the race thoughts out early on, and then in the last 24 hours, build that suspense up. And I don't even have to work that hard to build it. You can just see all the festivities, whether it's like, promotionals on social media for the Chicago Marathon, or like you follow other people on YouTube who will post their Chicago Marathon experiences, and that kind of hypes you up. Getting to the Chicago Marathon Expo, that's the biggest one that's going to hype you up. You show up there and you're ready to go. And like, I actually have a story with one of my coworkers who, when she was running marathons, like back in the day, she was not going to do the Chicago Marathon one year, and she was like signed up for it and whatnot, and she wasn't going to do it because she like injured her knee or something like that. But she went to the expo anyways, and after she left the expo, she committed to running the marathon, and I think she ran it in like 4.5 hours or something. So she was running with an injury and still ended up just doing the race because why not? She got hyped from the expo. So that's kind of a good example of building the race suspense in that case. So yeah, but if you are injured, definitely don't do that. Don't be like my coworker who like cannot run happily ever again because, she ended up kind of hurting her knee in a way where it's just not fun for her to run anymore. So I don't want to end it on that kind of a bad note, but those are kind of my 5 taper tips that I've been basically working the last 2 weeks. And despite us being, at the time of this video, it's going to be like 5 days from race day, but at the time of this filming, it's about 6. This is what I've been essentially doing as best as I could just to keep my mind off the marathon. And so far, it's worked quite well. So If you have any other taper tips or anything of that sort, definitely let me know in the comments below. But I think I'm going to end the video here. And again, if you agree with any of the things I've said or you want to relate to any of them, just, again, mention them down below. We can talk about it. So I will end the video here. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.